afternoon, everyone. So we will get started with the webinar today. So my name is Hannah Francis. I'm the marketing manager for Wellingtone, and I will be hosting the webinar today for Karin. Karin is one of our senior training consultants here at Wellingtone and has helped to develop a number of courses with us. And today she will be talking about Agile transformation. So I'll hand it over to Karin. I'd just also like to say as well, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask at the end, please do pop them in the Q&A panel, which is in your control panel, and we will get through as many as we can at the end. So Karin, over to you.
Right, thank you very much. Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. Like Hannah said, the topic today is Agile transformations. Specifically, what are some keys to ensuring that your Agile transformation is a success? In case you're not familiar with Wellingtone already, quick note about us. We're a project management consultancy firm, and our mission is to help our clients achieve a step change in their project and program management maturity. And we do that either through technology and software consultations, consultations around best practice and approaches to project management, and training. Like Hannah said, my name is Karin Maule. I'm a senior training consultant with Wellingtone. My background is in learning and development as well as project management. So I can manage to find a role where I can find my two big professional passions, which is great. In my role, I often get asked, what sort of course or what sort of training should we do for our employees so that they can do Agile? Or what sort of training do we do to do Agile? Or alternatively, what software or tool should we implement to make us Agile? I think it's a very interesting question. And of course, the tools that we use and the training and learning that we do are very important to any transformation or any change in how we work. But they're not the only parts. There are other things that we need to do as well to make sure we are successful in our transformation or change. And I'll outline some of those today in 11 keys to success for your transformation. But first, let's take a moment just to define what we mean when we talk about Agile. And because you've come to Wellingtone, I'm assuming that you are somehow in the world of project management, as it were, and you're interested in Agile in the context of project management, which is not something that we should take for granted. Agile is not just a project management method or methodology or approach. It can be applied at different levels of the organization and the business, but it can also be something that we use to deliver projects in a particular way. So when we talk about it in a project management context, it is an iterative development methodology that puts a lot of focus on the collaboration with the customer. And working in small ways, trying things out, testing them, learning from what we've done, and based on feedback from the team and the customer, adapt, learn, and improve as we go forward. Okay. In a practical way, it could look something like this. So instead of, as in a traditional linear, predictable, or waterfall methodology, we spend a lot of time up front defining our requirements, defining the entire scope, doing the entire plan for the whole project before we work through those entire plans to deliver a complete output at the end of the project. We instead work closely with the customer throughout the project to define right now what are the most important requirements, and then we plan just those, implement just those, test just those, deploy just those, and then we move on and we do this in smaller cycles. So what that means is the customer is involved in a different way, and we're able to release or deliver or transition not perhaps the entire output earlier, but at least parts or increments of the product earlier, so that the customer can start using it, at least some part of the complete or total solution. Okay. Agile is underpinned by a statement that was published in 2001, so it's 20 years old this year, called the Agile Manifesto. Now, the Agile Manifesto is not a document that outlines these are the steps you take to be Agile, or this is the tool you need to use, or the exact process you use. If anything, it's the opposite. It outlines not, not what we do or how we do it, but more the values that underpin why we do things in a certain way. So what the manifesto explains is that in order to be agile, your values, so the things that underpin everything that you do and kind of goes through the fabric of your way of working, as it were, should value the things that are listed on the left here. So individuals, interactions, working software or product, customer collaboration, and responding to change, over the things that you have listed on the right. So process tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, and following a plan. It doesn't mean that we're saying we're not going to do the things on the right anymore. It's just saying that we think the things on the left are more important. So the manifesto is important because it's a key aspect of what it means to implement Agile successfully. And it also gives us, if not a detailed map, then at least a pointer or a guideline for what it is we need to change towards when we do an Agile transformation. So what we want to do is move away from prioritizing the things on the right and move towards prioritizing the things on the left. Sounds a bit fluffy, perhaps. So I'm going to spend a bit of time later on in the webinar breaking that down into a little bit more detail. So practically, what might that entail? But the Agile Manifesto, very importantly, it's our starting point. Okay, it's our guiding light, as it were, for what we need to do in our transformation. So what are some of the things that might stand in the way of doing an Agile transformation? So moving from a more traditional waterfall way of working to a more Agile way of delivering our projects. So I'm drawing here upon a report that's published annually. It's called the State of Agile Report, and if you want to read the whole document, it's available at stateofagile.com. It's a report that's done annually and has been done for quite a few years now. So it provides not just a snapshot of what we get this year, but it actually provides a historical narrative as well of how Agile has developed and how it is kind of spreading. In this report, a number of different organizations are asked to answer some questions about their Agile practices and challenges, etc. One of the questions that is asked every year is, what challenges do you experience in your adoption of Agile? So you are trying to do an Agile transformation, what challenges do you face? And the most common challenges, so the top 5 or so, stay more or less the same every year. They might change in priority a little bit, but we see that there's a continuing trend, as it were. Typically, they are inconsistencies in processes and practices, cultural clashes, general organizational resistance to change, lack of skills and experience, absence of leadership participation, and inadequate management support and sponsorship. So those of you that have either been on one of our webinars about change management or in our courses, or maybe you have worked in organizational change before, you might say, that sounds quite familiar. And yes, indeed, none of these things are kind of unique to Agile transformations per se. They are typical challenges that we encounter anytime we try to do any type of organizational change. And really, an Agile transformation is the form of organizational change, right? So a starting point to figure out what can we do to make our change successful is to look at the wealth of knowledge and insight and research that is organizational change management. Now, on this slide, I have tried to boil down this huge amount of knowledge and research from decades and decades into some key points, like the essentials of organizational change management. It's incredibly simplified, of course, and generalized. And I really recommend you to go and do more reading and more research in this field, of course. But the key things to organizational change are, we need to remember that change is a process, not just an event. So with our Agile transformation, it's not just a switch, that we can flick. It's several steps and a lot of work that has to happen before, during, and after. Okay, and that has to be a lot, it takes some time. We must remember to put people at the heart of change. At the end of the day, it's people that will experience the change or transformation, and it's people that need to do something different afterwards. So it doesn't really matter how brilliant our plan is, or our risk management is, or what software we buy. If we forget to bring people on the journey, the transformation will fail. Okay? In order to avoid that happening, we have to help the organization and its people to get ready for change. And that includes making sure they understand and buy into why we're doing it. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. We also must know that resistance to change or transformation is inevitable, but it's something that can and should be managed. And then finally, if we want the transformation to be successful and sustained, we have to take action to reinforce it. Because if not, people, we're creatures of habit, we tend to just fall back into our old ways of working. Okay, so bear these in mind now as I take you through the 11 keys to success for your Agile transformation. And we're going to start with the importance of knowing your why. So why do you want to do, or why do you think you need to do an Agile transformation? So moving away from traditional linear waterfall ways of managing projects to a Agile approach to delivering and managing projects. So on the slide here, you will see some of the reasons or answers to that questions that I have come across. So they range from currently we can't define or plan for all requirements up front. It's impossible for some reason. We want to reduce project cost. We want to be more flexible, ranging through to, on the far right-hand corner, our CEO has read an article and now he wants us to become Agile or do Agile. Or we feel like everyone else is doing it, so surely we should be doing Agile as well. And all of these answers are representative of answers I have received to that question. And I think they can be divided into kind of 3 buckets. The first one here, so the things that we have furthest to the left, are things where I would say, yeah, it sounds like perhaps an Agile methodology to project delivery might help you. It might help. It might help you resolve that why or that problem that you're trying to fix. The answers in the middle. Agile methods might be the right thing for you, but maybe what you don't actually need a new formal methodology. Maybe what you're looking for is just a bit more agility. So a different way of going about doing the things that you do right now. Okay? And then we have the items in the far right-hand corner. And if that is similar to your answer to the question of why do an Agile transformation, I would say, please stay in the webinar anyway, because you might get some value from the later points that will help you in the future. But your first course of action should be to go back to whoever has made the ask to go Agile, do an Agile transformation, and dig a little bit deeper and try to understand better what pain point or problem it is they're trying to resolve. Because doing an Agile transformation, like I said, it is an organizational change effort, really. It requires a lot of work before, during, and after. And if you're doing all that work to resolve a problem that maybe doesn't exist, it's a huge waste, of course. And Agile by its very nature, and one of the underpinning principles of Agile is we want to reduce the time and effort we spend working on things that don't add value. We want to focus just on the things that are important and add value to the customer and to the business. So if you do something, if you do an Agile transformation for the sake of doing it, as it were, then by the very definition, you're not actually being Agile. Okay, so make sure you're clear on your why. So looking a bit more on the difference between Agile and agility. So when we talk about Agile with a capital A, as it were, it's more of that formal way of working. It changes processes, tools, practices, how people approach work. It's a significant change. Versus agility, it's more an ability or the way we go about doing things. You could probably achieve that just by tweaking how you go about doing existing processes or how you use existing tools. Okay, so Agile with a capital A, big change effort. Becoming more Agile, lesser effort and possibly just a tweak. Okay? Now, again, turning to the State of Agile report, here you can see the most common reasons why other organizations underwent an Agile transformation. And these are the results from the spring of this year. Again, if you want to read the full report, it's at stateofagile.com. Now, another value of understanding our why, both to make sure that we are really doing the right thing and something that adds value, but it also enables us to truly measure progress and success. So if we start by defining our why, or the reason why we're doing all of this work, we can then define how we will know that we are successful. So how will we have addressed the why effectively? Then we can figure out how will we measure that. So what metrics can we apply to measure that we have answered the why? And then finally, when we have all of that, we have to remember to benchmark where we are at right now. So how are we currently performing against that, the answer to the why, as it were. If we don't put a benchmark, we can't then, after the transformation, say that we've really had a success if we don't have anything to compare to. Okay? And then finally, still on the importance of knowing the why, because it is so important, people, like I said before, have to be at the heart of change. And people will resist any type of change. It's a natural reaction. It's what we're geared to do. And resistance will be more severe or stronger or worse, or however you want to describe it, if people do not know or do not believe in the why. So a why that is, it will help us improve something specific and something meaningful. That will help people accept the change. A why that is down the lines of some other guy said we probably should do this because he read an article, doesn't have a lot of meaning, and people are more likely to resist that. Okay, so number one, know your why. The second key to success, of course, you need to know Agile as well. You probably don't need to be an expert, but you should do it well enough that you can make decisions about what kind of Agile might be right for your organization. And I say what kind because Agile isn't just one thing. Agile is the framework that sits around a whole bunch of different approaches or methodologies, okay? And they each bring something to the table, right? Seeing as still, we're in the world of project management, and I'm assuming that you have come to us again because you are in the world of project management. The most common way of doing Agile in project management is Scrum. So Scrum is a framework that has roles, processes, and ways of doing things and approaching a project. And again, quoting from State of Agile, this year 66% of respondents said they use Scrum to deliver their projects. So most likely that is what will be appropriate for you, but we can't be absolutely sure, okay, without you making some informed decisions. But going through the rest of the webinar, there are a few specific points where I will refer either specific principles or roles, and they are Scrum based, okay? I'll point those out though when we get there. So once you get to know Agile a little bit better, you will also be able to see what aspects of your organization or your project structure or department or team, etc., it is that needs to be changed or adapted. At the heart of it, of course, we're talking about tools and processes, so how we do work, but also we need to change our practices. So how we engage with those tools and processes and other teams in the organization. It impacts our principles, so the underpinning things that determine how we do things and how we judge things. And related to that are our values. So how going forward will we say what is good, what is bad, what is right, what we prefer, etc. And then underpinning all of that is our mindset. So in order to do a true Agile transformation, it's not good enough to just change the name of the steps in our process or the tool that we use. The change has to run through all of these, including the mindset that holds it all together. So in a way, an Agile transformation is kind of a cultural change, really, because all of these things make up our culture. And on that note, Keys to success number 3, we have to align our culture to Agile. Okay, culture eats strategy for breakfast any day of the week, as in it doesn't matter how good our plans are or on paper how good the idea is. If our culture does not support the new way of working or approaching things, it's just not going to work. Okay? Bit of doom and gloom, but better to realize that early than to do an awful lot of work just to see it fail. Okay? And the good news is, though, in the Agile literature, the kind of cultural shifts that needs to be done are quite clearly outlined. Okay, so starting with the Agile Manifesto that we already looked at, effectively it does outline what sort of culture you need to have in order to successfully adopt Agile. So you need to have the kind of culture where individuals and interactions are seen as more important than following a specific process or using a tool. And producing working software or a product or an output is seen as more important than upfront comprehensive documentation. And customer collaboration is seen as more important than having a solid contract. And responding to and embracing change is more important than following a plan to a team. Okay? So if you're looking at this already and you say, our organization is 100% to the right here, all of those things are so important to us, then maybe you're not ready to do an Agile transformation. Maybe then what you should look to is, can we get a bit more agility into the way that we do all of these things? But Agile in its truest sense probably will not work. Okay? You can, of course, do an effort to update or change or tweak the organizational culture, but that is quite a significant change to do. Okay, and that's a whole other subject. The other source of information for what sort of culture we need to have comes from the Scrum guide. So assuming again that you would do Agile with Scrum, the Scrum guide sets out 3 principles that should underpin anything that you do and that runs through all the work with Scrum. And they are transparency, inspection, and adoption. So it means everyone can see what's going on, everyone is informed, and we continuously evaluate how we work to find things that we can do better and differently. And then we continuously adapt our ways of working accordingly. So a lot of transparency, continuously evaluating how we're doing, and then being quite adaptive in how we work. And again, if that sounds miles away from how you work today and the values you have in your organization, maybe take a step back and go back to your why and think, actually, is this right for us right now? Do we need to do some other work to get ourselves ready to align our culture with what it means to be Agile? Okay? It might feel like a step back, but it will pay off in the long run, I promise. And then the next step after that, or the next key to success, is to know your people. So people are at the heart of change. People have to be brought along on the journey. You have to do a lot of work up front to understand who the people are, how they're impacted, and what you can do to help them. So the first step is to understand who they are. Because we're in the context of project management, it might be appropriate to start looking at who is in our project team. So where are we going to start applying this? How will they be impacted? How does it change their roles, their ways of working, their experience of working here? And then how does that team interact with the rest of the organization? So who else is impacted? How are they impacted? Is it how they interact with the team, their role in relationship to the project, etc. And then also, don't forget the customer. Okay, the customer will need to be involved in a different way. Exactly how will that be different, and what will that mean for them and their expectations, etc. And then it's very important that you understand how people experience change. Said a few times already that a natural reaction is that we resist change, and that is because anytime we change something or transition, it means that we're leaving something behind. It might be that we're moving to something that on paper is better, but still it involves giving up something that we knew, something we were familiar with, and we're hardwired to resist that. So anytime a person is confronted with change, they go through this journey, the change curve that you can see on my slide here. And it mimics the steps that a person would go through when they deal with grief. And it's very much for the same reason. We have to give up something that we knew. We're leaving something behind, and it's difficult to do. So this is a very useful tool for anyone who's leading a transformation, because it illustrates the journey that people take. It identifies some behaviors that you can look out for and what you can do to help people through that journey. Okay, because you want to get people through to acceptance and then problem solving. Before they are there, they are, if not actively, then at least passively resisting the transition, and that can undermine the success of your transition. It does also give a few other helpful insights. One is, if you encounter resistance for your transition, it doesn't mean that the transition in itself is a bad idea or is a failure. And it certainly doesn't mean that you, who are leading the transition, that you are a failure or that you have done the wrong thing. It's a natural reaction, okay? But it doesn't mean that you should just let it be. It means that there are proactive things that you can do to help people through. And it does also give an important insight in that you, by the very fact that you're in this webinar, makes me think that you are quite far along on this change curve. You are already at the point where you're thinking, a transition might be a good idea. How do I go about doing that? So you are either at stage 6, acceptance, or possibly even problem solving, as in stage 7. And when you launch your transition with your colleagues, you will probably still be in acceptance or problem solving, but they will be all the way back at shock and denial. So you have to be self-aware to know where you are, and also to recognize where your colleagues are, and recognize that they need support that you yourself will not need, because you've already gone through that journey. You might have realized it, but you did. Okay. So then what can we do to prepare people? Well, we can look at the kind of things that they need to know, and also the kind of things that they need to be able to do to take part in the change journey itself. But then also, once we're past the change journey and we're into the new world, as it were, what do they need to do? Examples of that are project team. They need to be able to do Agile, to use a bit of a weird phrase. They need to actually be able to apply practices and knowledge and skills. And then we have the wider organization, so and other stakeholders. They also need to prepare for the change. They need to know what to expect and what will happen to them and their roles. And they might also need to do something differently. In that, just want to point out, I do still think that senior leadership are people as well. That's why I haven't split them out as 0.6 as it were. They're 5+. Senior leadership, incredibly important in any change effort. They have the power, just by how they kind of talk the talk and walk the walk, to either help or hinder your transition. Okay, a leader that says the right things, but then at the first opportunity slides back into the old way of working, will undermine all your efforts. So target them early, make sure they understand the why, and they can talk around it. Make sure they understand what is expected of them in terms of messages they should share and what actions they should take, and make it really clear that, yes, this does indeed apply to you too, dear senior leader. You are not exempt from the new ways of working. That will help you enforce your change. There are different kinds of tools that you can do to identify what needs to be done to increase readiness. On the slide here, you can see a simple kind of a version of a stakeholder register, where we just listed our stakeholders at the left, and then identified, for this transition, what do they need to know, what do they need to be able to do, and as a result of that, what actions do we need to take. Okay? There are lots of different examples of this kind of register, but in the simplest form, this can be quite helpful. A note about learning and engagement, because at some point here, in order to prepare people for the change and make them ready, you will need to do some form of learning, engagement, or training. And it's very common, and I hear this a lot, that people get sent on a formal training course, 1, 2, 3 days, whatnot, and then they come back to work and they're expected to be able to just run with it, and they'll be experts and ready to go. And often that doesn't work. And that's not just Agile, that's for any type of training, really. And that is explained through a model called the 70-20-10 model. It's a very old concept that has been used in learning and development for absolutely ages. And what that says is only 10% of our overall learning comes from formal training. Okay, then we get 20% of learning from other people, for example, through training or through shadowing colleagues, etc. And 70% of our overall learning comes from doing things. So having an opportunity to practice, try things out, fail a little bit perhaps, but learning from experience. So when you set up your Agile team, make sure you set them up for success by making sure you're providing them with the 10, the 20, and the 70. So formal training, yes, very important, but back that up with coaching or shadowing, and also make sure that they have an environment where they can practice and fail a little bit and then do better next time. Our next, of course, we also need to think about non-human aspects of the organization. So processes, technology, and tools. Do our other processes that interact with projects, do they fit with Agile and our new ways of working, or do they need to be changed, or do we need to change how we do our Agile approach? Okay, typical examples: billing, invoicing, forecasting, procurement and contracting, resourcing, just to name a few. Okay? And with technology, do we have the technology and the tools to support our teams to work Agile? So think of things like practical and easy communication tools, planning and visual aids, Kanban boards, for example. There are lots of options available, but yeah, just make sure you have those in place for the team. Then, very importantly, managing expectations is absolutely key. Agile is not an overnight success. You will never be able to say, we start on Monday and by Tuesday things will be great. Yet, many people seem to think that will be the case. Both people that start out practicing Agile and applying Agile approaches, so the project team themselves, but also other stakeholders. And you can do a lot there in making sure the team understands up front that this will be a journey. It might be a bit painful and a bit frustrating at first, because we're trying something new and we don't know exactly how it's going to work. So we're gonna have to try and then stop and inspect how we work. And then we adapt that and we do better and better and better. But that's a journey that takes time. So for anyone that expects to be able to just run with it from day one, they might find that a little bit discouraging. So empower, encourage your team, and get them to keep going when the going gets tough. And with other stakeholders, they might also expect an overnight success, so manage their expectations. And for a lot of stakeholders, there's a lot of misconceptions about Agile. They might think that it's just a new way of working that will mean we get results faster or better. But my role and everything I see will stay exactly the same. And that might not be the case, or the demands that they make on the team, for example, in terms of the reports they want or detailed upfront plans, etc. That probably will not stay the same. So make sure that they understand that and that their expectations are managed so they do not undermine the team's effort. And ideally, of course, that's captured in your stakeholder analysis and readiness plans. Then, of course, before you embark on a change, it's important that you choose the right approach. So looking at kind of two polar opposite approaches, you could do either a big bang, where you overnight, as it were, roll out Agile approaches across the whole organization or division or however you're focused. Or you could take a more gradual or iterative approach, as in we start small, test it out, see how that works out and what we need to change, then we change and adopt that, and then we roll it out more and more and more. Now, there are pros and cons for both. With a big bang, of course, you get it's very clear when it happens, and you get it's quite a comparatively a faster, I guess, faster transition, if we say that. The disadvantage is especially something with Agile that needs to be quite specific to the organization, and the team needs to take a lot of ownership of how they work. A big bang approach might not enable them the time it takes to build up to them. And by its very nature, the gradual or iterative approach fits better with the values and what Agile really is. So there's something in there about you have an opportunity now to start approaching this in a more agile way. So I guess be agile in your transition to get agile. Hope that makes sense. As your team has formed and you're starting to apply agile practices, the team might struggle a bit. Like I said before, it can be a bit of a journey, a bit of a frustrating experience. And if you're an external person there and you're kind of there to support the team in some way, it's very easy and very dangerous to try to step into the team to be helpful. But especially if you're implementing Scrum, there are some very specific roles and structure for teams. And it's very important that teams are allowed to become self-organizing, so where they find their own feet and their way of working. So even though it's tempting to support in every single way, you need to be mindful that you support them in a way that doesn't undermine the Scrum roles or the ceremonies and processes that they should go through the Scrum framework. So support, but perhaps support at a distance and without actually intervening in the team. Okay. Then also make sure you know yourself and where you're currently at and your understanding and experience and expertise in Agile. Okay, I've talked a bit about coaching already and the importance of having coaching and support for the team as they go through their Agile journey. And in order to be a successful coach, ideally you will have walked in the shoes of the people that you're coaching, specifically to do with Agile. So whereas I think that if you're starting from scratch now, this is your first interaction with Agile here, you can upskill yourself to be able to train people in terms of talking them through processes and practices and what the roles are, etc. When it comes to coaching and a bit of leading and hand-holding and pointing out how to get through challenges or conflicts, etc., you do really need to have someone that has walked a mile in those kind of shoes or have fought the battles themselves. So if you're not that person, find someone that is. It might mean you have to contract with someone external, but it will be worth it in the long run. And when you try to find that person, you're contracting for them, look beyond the title where they call themselves an Agile coach. Ask questions to them about their experience and make sure they do really have hands-on experience that they bring to the table to be able to help the team. And then keys to success number 10, you need to reinforce the change, okay, or the transformation, or people will just by the nature of being a human being, a creature of habit, will slide back into the old ways of working. So things you can do, keep repeating and reinforcing the why. It's a very important message all the way throughout the transformation and beyond. Ensure, again, that there is coaching available. Coaching is an incredibly powerful way of reinforcing a transition or change. When you see examples of good or right behavior, so people are working in the new ways, make sure you recognize that and reward it. And that goes for the project team, teams that they interact with, and also senior leaders. And if you see a senior leader doing the right thing, it can be a really powerful thing to call that out in newsletters or company-wide town halls, etc. That Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, by doing X, Y, Z, is supporting the success with the Agile transformation. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without you, etc. That sort of thing. Hand it on a little bit. That has the double effect that that person, that senior leader, will not be very likely to slip back in the old ways of working, and they're more likely to encourage their people to do the right thing. but also other teams and other senior leaders will see it, and they will automatically also want to get on the the recognition bandwagon, as it were. So recognizing and rewarding the right behavior is incredibly powerful when reinforcing a change as well. On that note, celebrate successes and key achievements. At the start, when we defined our why, we also defined what is success and how are we going to measure it. So as you're hitting important milestones or achieving some of those metrics, make sure you call it out, celebrate it. Guys, all that hard work is paying off. We've already achieved XYZ, for example. And then finally, in as far as it's possible, try to remove old ways of working. For example, can you make it really clear on the intranet that what documents are not applicable to a waterfall or an agile project? Can you remove a process from the intranet, for example, or make it impossible to submit a request through a certain path or whatever it is? However that looks in your environment, see what you can do to make it difficult to use the old ways. That's also very powerful. And finally, very important key to success, learn your lessons. The agile transformation is a journey. It's going to take time. It will be a bit difficult at first. And for the best result, you want to try something small, see how that goes, learn from that experience, adapt how you do things, and then move on to bigger and better things as well. That in itself is very agile. Learning from our experience makes us more agile and adaptable. Assuming, of course, that those lessons that we learn actually lead to action and some improvement. Okay. Now, that is the end of our webinar for today. So 11 keys to success in agile transformations. So just to repeat what they were: know your why, know agile, align culture, know your people, prepare for change, manage expectations, choose the right approach, support but do not intervene, know yourself, reinforce the change or transformation, and learn your lessons. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Karin. That was really good, and I'm sure that the delegates that have attended have received some really useful tips on how to implement an agile transformation within their organisation. To anyone that has attended, we have obviously recorded the session, and we will be sending it out as a follow-up email. So look out for that over the next afternoon. And yeah, I'd just like to say thank you again to Karin for presenting and taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got some training to do today, and thank you for everyone that's attended.
Thank you, Anna.